All right. Sorry about that. Little technical difficulties. Not sure what happened there, but we're back now, and we were talking about Tom Brady. Look, the thing is, the one sec. The thing is, look, the Bucks have so much talent that with Tom Brady at QB, you're guaranteeing Gronk back. You're guaranteeing, a lot of people that are going to be bought into running it back with the Buccaneers. And I think that gives you a huge opportunity to compete in a division or conference, really, that doesn't have a solidified team. You'd assume that the Bills, the Chiefs, they still have very, very much an opportunity. But I mean, if you're Tom Brady, you got to feel pretty good about your chances to at least get out of the NFC if you come back for another season. We'll see what happens. So there's been talk of Kyle Trask potentially being the starter for them. There's been talk of Blaine Gabbert potentially getting the job for a year. So plenty of options on the table for Tampa, but ultimately I think it's pretty evident that Tom Brady's the best option. So maybe make some calls, see if you can really convince him to come back. But we talked Rodgers, but now it's time to talk about the big trade that occurred.
Oh
The
yeah.
Denver Broncos acquire Russell Wilson from the Seattle Seahawks. Look, Nick, I said this when we talked about the Broncos blueprint. I said they have the money to where they can go and get a star quarterback and then find a way to kind of, you know, still add to their roster. Russell Wilson is probably one of the more convenient contracts when it comes to superstar QBs right now because Seattle was taking on a lot of the money for them. So the cap hit of a Russell Wilson isn't as bad as, most superstar quarterbacks. The Broncos obviously parted ways with some talented players, Shelby Harris, Noah Fant. Uh, some may consider Drew Lock, and they gave away plenty of draft picks, but they still have an opportunity to add to their roster. They have Russell Wilson. What are your thoughts on this Denver Broncos team now that they finally gotten the quarterback figured out?
I mean, maybe they're the third best team in the division now instead of the fourth. It's really tough in that division. Russell Wilson's great, so I think with 7 teams, they'll be a wild card team. I don't know what's going to be the team on the outside looking in because we had Khalil Mack go to the Chargers yesterday. The Chargers should have been the best last year. I guess right now I would say the Raiders are probably going to be the odd team out there. But wow, I mean, this is just tremendous quarterbacking. You look at this division, then you look at the NFC East with Wentz, Prescott, Jones, and Hurts. I mean, night and day right there. I know you're very high on the Broncos. You're probably having them in the Super Bowl this year, but I don't know. I don't know if they're the best team in the division. So I definitely think they're a playoff team, though.
Yeah, I feel like there's plenty of upside now with Denver. I think there's still some work to be done in terms of figuring out the rest of the roster, adding some more talent to this team, but they have money. There's talk that Chandler Jones could very easily follow Russell Wilson there and become one of the edge rushers there. It sounds like Von Miller's likely to head back. Who knows what's going to happen with Denver, but I think they are going to be extremely fun to watch this offseason. I'm probably buying into the hype just because we've seen it 2 years in a row. New QB, new team, and they go on and win it. Obviously, it's not just this tried and true formula, but I like the hype. I like the build that's going to be happening. I like the overall team structure. The big question mark for Denver, in my mind, is the defense because I do think Fangio was a big part of that defensive success. The durability that they had has just been extremely concerning over the past 2 years. So, Fangio was able to get great production out of third, fourth string players. Whereas now with this new defense, are the starters even going to be up to that level? Are the backups going to be able to play to that level? So there's definitely going to be some question marks about this Denver team, but I do like the upside that they have. You know, talking about the Chargers with the Khalil Mack trade, that's going to be crazy. There might be more contender teams in the two divisions of AFC North and AFC West than there is in the entire NFC. And that is ridiculous to even think about. But I mean, you're talking about Cleveland Browns, who have one of the more solid rosters in terms of just well-roundedness. Baltimore Ravens, who have one of the best defenses in football and one of the biggest playmakers in Lamar Jackson. Cincinnati Bengals, who are just in the Super Bowl. Now you go to the AFC West, Chiefs, who are consistently a contender, Broncos, who now just have Russell Wilson, and what a good roster they had outside of that anyway. Chargers, who have one of the most young and up and coming rosters. Raiders, who still have a very good foundation. Josh McDaniels going in there. Patrick Graham, a very good defense coordinator. There is so much talent in the AFC right now that it's extremely exciting. It's a little bit concerning as a fan of a team that's kind of probably not going to be winning the division, so they have to hope for one of those wild card spots. But man, this is going to be a extremely fun AFC West to keep an eye on. And I think I would agree with you in terms of I think the Raiders are probably that fourth team in terms of who I would think has the highest odds to at least win the division. But I do think that there's plenty of upside still for all four of these squads. And I think Russell Wilson's just going to make this an extremely exciting season for the Denver Broncos.
Yeah, I mean, the hype's going to be legit. So I think many people are going to pick them. But I mean, listen, Mahomes is still there. Not that I like the Chiefs. They're going to win games. I like the Chargers. I think eventually they're going to have to break through here. The Raiders were in the playoffs last year. We'll see what happens with Josh McDaniels. But there's also Josh Allen, who is there, Lamar Jackson, and Joe Burrow and the Bengals. So it's really tight out of the AFC. It just makes you feel like if you're a Jets fan, you're gonna be like, oh, we have no shot anytime soon. Not to pick on the Jets, but you know what I'm saying. Those type of teams, they're not gonna contend. So that AFC is wide open though, and there could be some more movement, but. What do you think about for the Seahawks side of things? Is Drew Lock going to start? Are they going to go with Geno Smith? And there's more movement to talk about, but we'll talk about that first before we do the Wentz trade.
Yeah. So in terms of Seahawks, it sounds like they're looking at a quarterback with number 9. Whether that's if Malik Willis falls or if they like Matt Corral, Kenny Pickett, whoever. It sounds like they like Corral from what I've gathered. There's been speculation they like Willis. There's been speculation they like Pickett. But the thing that seems most consistent is that I think it's Corral, and they want to kind of go to this RPO-style offense that really kind of plays into his strengths. And I like Corral. I think there's plenty of potential there. I think with the weapons that they have in place, there's certainly potential with Noah Fant, DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett. If they hold on to all three, still plenty of moves that could happen on Seattle's side in terms of just continuing the rebuild. But I think this is going to be a very bad team next year. And that doesn't necessarily mean that this QB that they draft, if they do draft one, is going to be awful. But I do think that this was a team that was lifted up by Russell Wilson. And with Russell Wilson gone, I mean, there's just going to be some very evident issues on this team. It wouldn't surprise me if the Seahawks are picking number 1 in the NFL draft next year. And I do think that there's other teams that are going to compete for that. I don't think it's set in stone. But I do think that the fall off with no Russell Wilson on this roster is going to be very evident. And the Seahawks are probably going to have to rebuild this roster a lot more than they probably realize with Russell Wilson there to kind of band-aid a lot of issues.
Yeah, it's going to be really telling. I mean, I think this has got to be the last year for Pete Carroll, right? I mean, he's going to stick around for such a rebuild? I don't think so.
Yeah, and I mean, the real question is what's going to happen with the entire front office. I mean, Pete Carroll is certainly getting up there in age. Is he really going to be someone that sticks around for a rebuild? Is John Schneider really someone that the Seahawks trust to rebuild this roster? Because he's wasted first-round picks year after year with guys that are just way out of value and just not matches for what the talent should be at these selections. So there's going to be some big question marks and some serious internal, just observations that need to be made for the Seahawks if they really want this rebuild to work out, because I think there's plenty of potential with the trades that they've made and the trades that they will likely make going forward. But Russell Wilson's gone. Bobby Wagner got cut, and that's, extremely surprising just on a talent standpoint. It made sense from a cap space move, but I mean, that's something that is going to be extremely interesting. Keep an eye on where he lands. Spoiler, I have him on today's blueprint, but I think that there's plenty of options and plenty of teams that could be in the mix for him. And I think this is going to be a long process for the Seahawks to kind of rebuild. But I do like the chances that if they play into the strengths of Matt Corral, working with the DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, that he can potentially become something with the Seahawks.
You think Metcalf's going to stay, or are they going to look to move him as well?
There's been rumors that that they're looking to trade him because they don't want to pay him the money that he's probably going to need to stick around. But it would be tough to warrant trading a guy like DK Metcalf with his size, speed, talent combination. It's extremely difficult to just validate that. And I know that the pay is going to be big. And I know that if you don't plan on paying him, then you should capitalize on the value. But I think with a guy like Metcalf, with the talent level that he offers, you just pay him and you're happy with it. Because even if you trade him and you get like a top 10 pick in this draft, you're not getting a receiver or a player that's DK Metcalf caliber. I mean, you could potentially, but I mean, if they're less than DK Metcalf, you're probably happy with the pick, but that's not worth the trade. So it's one of those situations where I think you ride with DK and you keep him on your bench because he's a superstar and you need to treat him like that.
All right, there the trade then would be Carson Wentz on the move again, third team in 3 years. He is heading to the Washington Commanders. Looking forward to seeing them take on the Eagles, that's for sure. But I guess first, let's deal with the Colts here. They need to either know, they're definitely getting Jimmy Garoppolo, or they think Andrew Luck's coming back, because I don't know what they're going to do with their specific spot in the draft to say they're ready to contend this year, whoever they pick. Or maybe Marcus Mariota. I think he gave the job down there as well. But what do you think is going to happen with the Colts?
I think they're going to end up making a trade for Trubisky. But I think this is something that needs to be addressed in terms of the Colts. Chris Ballard's one of the most overrated GMs in football. He's smart. He's not like a bad GM in the slightest, but this is someone that has consistently balked when it comes to making the move to kind of set his franchise over the top. And you can't play scared when you're GM. I understand that you want to build your team up through the draft and you want to extend your own guys. And you want to make it work in that way with player development. That's fine. That's absolutely fine. But you cannot just year after year just kind of go with a Band-Aid to fix the most important position in football and just be touted as the best GM in the NFL. And so many people overrate Ballard as this genius of a guy, but what have the Colts done during his tenure? They've made playoffs a couple times. That's it. They have a very good team. They have a very good structure in place, sure. But when you're bringing in a new QB every single year, when you're trying to put that QB with maybe one viable weapon in Michael Pittman and then just six nobodies in terms of receivers and tight ends, you're not a good GM. I know a lot of people want to excuse the issues that GMs have and say oh, it's a hard thing to do. NFL GMing is a lot harder than fans realize. It is. I understand that 100%. But you cannot tell me that this guy in 5 years is oh, I didn't know a wide receiver was in need when all we had was Michael Pittman and the corpse of T.Y. Hilton. Come on. You got to be more aware of what's going on with your roster, and you need to kind of make those observations in the offseason. Even if you're doing small value deals, you need to bring in more talent than Zach Pascal as your number 2 wideout, or else you're going to have issues with whatever QB's there, and you're not going to be appealing to some of these veteran options that you want to come into your organization.
I mean, it's very well said. So we'll see what happens. So to the Commanders now. How does Heineke feel about this? Was Ron Rivera thing? I think Wentz is going to be very motivated when he plays the Eagles twice. But I mean, Wentz didn't have a good week 18, but for the season he was good. 27 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. So I think that's definitely an upgrade for them.
I think there's some solid promise in Wentz. I mean, the whole thing with Wentz is that he has one drive where he looks like an MVP candidate, and then the next drive where he just looks like a third-string QB that can never make a read to save his life. So the big thing is trying to figure out how you can unlock that consistency. I don't trust it for the Commanders. I think this was a bad move in regards to Wentz is such a fragile ego from what we've heard from the outside that I don't trust that he's going to keep his confidence on his third team. I don't trust that he's going to be able to lead a franchise. And I think that's going to result in some issues. Honestly, I don't think Ryan Fitzpatrick being your starting QB next year would have been a bad move, especially because, you could have very easily drafted a quarterback with number 11. But Fitzpatrick got 6 passes. And then he's just like, he got hurt. And now they're like, okay, we're done. Like, you're telling me that you brought this guy in to be your starter and you were sold on him. And then 6 passes later, you were like, okay, yeah, never mind. There's no way. So, like, what changed with Ryan Fitzpatrick, a guy that we've seen kind of at least be a solid quarterback? Like, I don't think he's going to save your franchise, but I think he could have been a nice, cheap option to, be your veteran guy while you got your rookie quarterback ready and kind of put your organization forward. I think it would have been a lot more promising than bringing in Wentz, who, from the rumors of it, isn't necessarily the best at receiving criticism. Frank Reich, who was his offensive coordinator and the guy that vouched for him, like, apologized for saying that they should bring in Wentz. And that's like one of the biggest red flags you can even think of because he was such a big Wentz believer prior to the season. So I don't know. There's a lot of concerns in my mind when it comes to Wentz on Washington. If it works out, then Washington certainly could win the division. I think they have the talent on their roster, but ultimately, I think there is going to be some question marks for Wentz all season long, and that consistency is going to be one of the biggest question marks when it comes to his play.
Yeah, his play says it reeks of desperation for the Commanders.
Yeah. It absolutely
does.
Because, you were talking about Trubisky as the quarterback. I think he would have been a fine option as well. Like,
listen, Trubisky's coming to my New York Giants. I've been wanting this for months now, and it seems like it's going to happen. I truly believe if he comes to the Giants, he's going to win the starting job from Daniel Jones because Daboll has no ties to Daniel Jones. He saw what Trubisky could do, and the GM too. So give me Mitch Trubisky. It'll be a much improved Giants there, but we're not going to talk too much about the Giants here. But so the Colts, basically they give up like a first-round pick, a second-round pick, and a third-round pick, and in return they get like a third-round pick and a second-round pick. So was that really a good trade? I don't know.
They lost the deal, that's for sure. And we talked about it when Chris Ballard had his end-of-season press conference. When you're roasting your quarterback like that blatantly, I feel like there's definitely a dent on value that you kind of made for yourself. So I didn't like the move at all. Even if you wanted to move on from Wentz, I feel like you should have just said, like, oh, yeah, like we believe Carson Wentz is our starter. We think he can become something and we hope he does, whatever. But to go out and just kind of blatantly, like, just completely trash him, I didn't love the move because I feel like kind of no matter what, you're hurting your trade value in that regard. And obviously it still resulted in a decent trade, but you're still losing on the overall deal because you gave up so much for him in the first place.
So Wentz is going to start this year, most likely. But to me, I'd rather have Marcus Mariota start. I think there's more upside there. I don't know. I think it's just bizarre that Mariota hasn't been a starting job the last 2 years here.
Yeah, I think with Mariota, he's definitely going to find a place where he may not be the starter on day one, but it's a QB that's going to give him a potential option to become
Houston
a starter.
Would be great.
And Earthplate letting us know Max Crosby just signed a 4-year, $95 million extension with the Raiders. Crosby coming off of a tremendous year at the edge rusher position for Las Vegas. Obviously an absolute stud, very young. Josh McDaniels must have, been very confident in what he saw because Crosby looked great. And I think that's a huge get for them to keep him in town. He's definitely kind of become one of the leaders of this team, one of the leaders of the defense. And I mean, it's hard to fault this move at all. I think this is definitely a good move for the Raiders. Keep your star players there and keep pressure on the plethora of superstar quarterbacks in your division. But yeah, going back to
the Raiders though, that's great. They fix things I think offensively now. Big swing and misses here with their wide receiver picks the last few years. So that's bad situation there. So we'll see what happens with the new regime.
Yeah, absolutely. I really like DJ Chark for them just because I think he's someone that's kind of had a
Stable.
Bad issue of terrible QB play, but still been able to produce decently. So I hope that he goes to the Raiders. Carr gets a good, reliable receiver. Chark gets a good QB, and I think it would work out pretty well. They got to make some moves, though. I mean, they are definitely feeling the pressure probably most out of any of the teams when it comes to the recent moves in the division. I think the Chiefs still feel like they're the top dog. The Chargers now have Khalil Mack, so they're feeling good. The Broncos got their QB, so they're feeling good. The Raiders probably feel a little bit heat of, look, we need to do something in order to stay in this race because right now, even if we like our team, we're still losing ground.
Yeah, McDaniels doesn't want to go back to New England this quickly.
Yeah. But speaking of Mariota, I think that he is going to probably end up in a spot like Houston or something where Davis Mills is the starting QB. But if Davis Mills struggles, Houston's not going to necessarily feel like they have to stick with him all season. And that allows Mariota to potentially get some snaps in there, get some starts, and maybe reset his value as a more solidified starter if he performs well.
New Orleans, are they going to bring Jameis back, or is Jameis going back to Tampa Bay?
Yeah, that's one of the interesting storylines that I'm looking to follow because I think New Orleans would love to bring Jameis back, but I don't know if they can make the money work to pay Jameis what he could potentially get on the market. I think Winston has proven that he is a very solid quarterback, very dependable starter. I mean, there's still going to be some turnovers, I think, even with the growth that I think he had under Peyton. I think he's still going to have some turnover issues. But ultimately, there's not many quarterbacks in the league that have as talented of an arm as Winston. And I think with that, he makes some great plays, great throws that are going to allow him to become one of the better quarterbacks in the league. I think Indy could be a team that looks at him and potentially weighs their chances of getting him. There's some organizations around the league that are going to be interested in Winston. And in a potential bidding war, New Orleans is going to be the team that's most strapped for cash when it comes to him.
Yeah. I can't see New Orleans going with Hill or Simeon to start. So,
that'd be awful.
I don't know. We're going to get Tyrod Taylor. That seems like most teams do. All right, last QB, I guess to really touch on it, just is like, what do you think the timeline is here for the 49ers to trade Garoppolo? And are they going to trade him wherever he wants? How are they going to work that out?
I think that they're going to find a spot for Garoppolo to start, but the ultimate timeline for him, it seems weird because there's been talk that there's going to be some news. One sec, let me check if this comment's legit.
Yeah, that's big, but then the NFL finally have to. It's a Watson comment. NFL would have to finally decide what the deal is with Deshaun.
He's not being criminally charged. He's not being criminally charged. Deshaun Watson.
For all cases,
criminal charges. Yeah, so that's absolutely huge.
Yeah. Well, the NFL needs to now finally decide how long they're going to suspend him for.
I think he's going to get like a 6-game suspension or something. But when it comes to who will get Watson, I was big on Carolina for a while there, but I think Philadelphia makes the most sense. They were rumored to be in on Russell Wilson. I think they're going to offer up all their first-round draft picks this year, potentially much more, but I think that's the baseline is, 3 first rounds this year, maybe a first next year. I don't know. But if they were in on Wilson, I think they're in on Watson. I think they like Hurts, but I don't think they're committed to Hurts. And with an opportunity like Watson, with guys like Devonta Smith, Dallas Goedert, I think Philadelphia makes the most sense to land Watson. I think we're going to see a trade. Probably by the end of the night, we will probably have a lot of smoke. And I think by the end of the weekend, Deshaun Watson will be on his
it's just team. So risky until Roger Goodell says something.
Yeah,
we'll show the comment here. Thanks, Steelers X55. We do appreciate you breaking that news to us. It's risky.
It's risky.
The Dolphins, I think, are still interested though.
I think Chris Greer came out and said, we're not trading for Watson. I don't think that it would be a bad
How
move.
about the
I don't.
Seahawks?
Yeah, that's also another team that's been rumored about it. Apparently, they love Watson's. I think Daniel Jeremiah maybe was a guy that said like from everything he heard, he thinks Seahawks are going to get Watson. Seahawks are going to be in on him. Panthers are going to be in on him. Steelers may be in on him.
Well,
There's going to
let
be
me
a
ask
lot
you
of
about
teams that
this
are
team
interested.
because I know you love their current quarterback, but what about the Bears? Last year we heard about the Bears before the draft. Obviously, they got Fields now, but do you think they would move Fields for Watson?
I think it'd be something they'd consider. I think when you're looking at Justin Fields, he showed promise. Like I don't think Justin Fields is someone that you look at and you're like, okay, we need to figure out what we're doing at QB because this is a bad performance. But I mean, if I told you Justin Fields turns into Deshaun Watson level player, you're saying let's go. Like that's amazing because it's a Deshaun Watson level player. Like Deshaun Watson's a stud. So while I think Fields is certainly someone that you can bring in as your starting QB and you're happy with him, uh, and I think he could potentially become something of a stud. Deshaun Watson is already the stud, so I
Yeah.
think you'd be very happy to have him. I think uh, will the Bears be willing to pay the price that comes with it? Because I think they'd probably think, oh, well, we're giving Fields, we should get a heavy discount on the rest of it, whereas other teams maybe are willing to offer more picks. And, it just depends on what the Texans are looking for in regards to that.
Yeah. Gonna be interesting. A lot more to come. All right. So before we do the blueprint here, gotta ask you your thoughts on Calvin Ridley and his suspension followed by his tweets.
I hate to see it just because I think Ridley is a very talented wide receiver in the NFL, probably top 15. But I mean, you can't gamble. I think he knew that it was just a foolish move on his end. And unfortunately, now we're going to miss Ridley for a second year. We're going to have to see probably more chaos when he eventually returns and whatever value it'll be. But
Poor Matt Ryan.
yeah, I mean, it was a dumb move. I'm sure the
My,
Falcons appreciate the cap space, but I think they would have preferred to have had Ridley willing to return instead.
yeah, especially looking at the division right now without any big dogs. My only, comment is kind of just like, Ridley gets a 1 year suspension for gambling on games he's not playing. But people like Ezekiel Elliott beat somebody up, beat a female up, and they get 6 games. So I don't know, something's wrong there with the scale here with suspensions, and now we'll see what the Watson suspension ends up being as well. I don't think it's going to be a year, so we'll see
It'll
what happens.
be it'll be really interesting to see what they decide on Watson because they're almost going to have to do their own internal investigation, and what they kind of decide from that is going to be crucial in terms of what Watson's value is going forward. So plenty of intrigue on that, and I think the NFL will have to move extremely fast because I mean teams are looking to kind of make a trade before this draft happens. That's for sure. So moving on to the mock draft blueprint, we're talking Baltimore Ravens today, and starting with the offseason, I think they bring back Deshaun Elliott. I don't know if he's necessarily the long-term fix at free safety. Had some range issues for the Ravens, missed a lot of tackles, but ultimately, I think you bring him back at least for another season. In free agency, the Ravens love to sign guys that don't cost against the comp pick formula, and I think that's a guy like Bobby Wagner where they need a linebacker. They need help in that regard. If they can get a Wagner, I think they're going to feel a lot more confident about their chances to not just be a very good playoff team, to be a contender. And I think they're willing to pay the money for it. 2 years, probably 20 million. I think maybe even a little more, 22, 24, whatever it is. I think it's worth it. Getting a guy like Wagner would be absolutely huge for this defense and huge for the Ravens' chances going forward. In the draft, I have him going David Ajabo, edge rusher out of Michigan, high school teammates with Adaf Fayowe. Ajabo is someone that has plenty of pass rush upside, needs to develop a little bit as a run defender, but there's still plenty of potential and just star power here. The Ravens generate pressure in all sorts of ways. Obviously, with Wink gone, there's question marks in terms of what will happen for this defense, but I think Ojabo still fits the bill of what they're going to try to look for. And I think there's going to be a real chance that with Ojabo and Owe, you're looking at the Ravens having one of the most enticing young edge rushing duos in the NFL. At 45, I have him going Daniel Falele, offensive tackle out of Minnesota. He fits exactly what the Ravens look for out of their offensive tackles. You think of like Orlando Brown, who maybe didn't have the greatest combine, but had such great size and strength that he was able to develop into a star tackle for them. Falele becomes that right tackle of the future for them. I think they will have someone else play right tackle immediately, but in time, you get Falele ready, you get Falele set to be a star, and then he's an absolute stud once he takes over that starting right tackle job. At 76, I have him going for Darian Mathis. Brandon Williams, a free agent. I don't think they bring him back. You get some more defensive run stuffers. You get some beef on the defensive line. Mathis, kind of underrated because he's not really the premier pass rusher type, but he's still going to be an absolute stud on the interior, and I think the Ravens would benefit tremendously from bringing him in. At 99, Varon McKinley, the free safety out of Oregon, absolute playmaker. Like I said, Deshaun Elliott may not be the long-term fix, but you have the opportunity to kind of bring in some competition for him. And McKinley, I think, just absolute playmaker on the ball at Oregon could very easily be a stud free safety for the Ravens in time. At 108, I have him going Josh Williams out of Fayetteville State, the cornerback. Plenty of athleticism and intrigue. I think this is kind of up the Ravens' alley of betting on traits and seeing if they can develop it. Josh Williams kind of fits that bill, adds opportunity for the secondary, a secondary that has an aging Jimmy Smith who may return, but maybe isn't going to be your long-term solution. They're losing Anthony Averett to free agency. So getting a guy like Josh Williams, seeing what he can become, seeing what you can make of him, I think it's a great gamble. At 117, I have him getting DeMarco Jackson out of Appalachian State. Yes, Bobby Wagner helps fill your linebacker need, but I think you still want to kind of solidify the linebacker unit, add some youth, and DeMarco Jackson brings that in extremely well. At 126, Ayoma Uwazurike, the defensive lineman out of Iowa State. This is someone that I think is just one of the more safe day three guys that's going to be a decent contributor for a long time. Maybe never going to be a flashy defensive lineman or one of the studs of the league, but I think he sticks around for like 8 to 12 years just on solid play and contribution on the defensive line. Was a long-time starter for Iowa State, big-time contributor on the defensive line, and a great leader for the defense. Here on the Ravens, adding him in with a unit that's losing Calais Campbell. You're not replacing Calais Campbell with him, but I think you're helping kind of fill in the gap that Campbell will leave. At 138, Vias Jones, wide receiver out of Tennessee. You add in this speedster with ability on the outside. You have Bateman, you have Marquise Brown, but I think you get some depth in that wide receiver room. James Proche, Devin Duvernay, there's pieces, but I think you want some outside size. I think Proche and Duvernay are more slot guys. Marquise Brown, obviously a little slim, but still plays outside. But adding Vias Jones, I think, really adds to the wide receiver unit and is a great pick here on day 3. They have so many fourth-round picks, by the way. Ravens just absolutely dominating the whole trade back effect, which will likely happen on draft day, where they trade some of these picks for future picks or whatever. But I didn't want to do those predictions, so I'm just having a pick. And these are some great needs that I think could fill in through the draft. At 140, I have him going Dominique Robinson out of Miami, Ohio. Tremendous athlete. Obviously you have Odafe Owe. You now have David Ojabo, but getting some rotation into that edge rush room would be absolutely huge. And I think it would give a great opportunity for the Ravens to kind of look at a young trio that could very well contribute from all 3 guys. And then at 195, after the season the Ravens had, where all their running backs, like literally every single one, just seems to have gotten injured, I think this is, a nice pick. Sincere McCormick, absolutely one of the more dependable, productive running backs in college football. Adding him to this draft, I think, solidifies the class and gives the Ravens a very good haul when it comes to looking at this potential mock draft for them. So we move from the draft to their offense and mostly running it back with the same guys. Lamar Jackson at QB, a healthy J.K. Dobbins at running back, Marquise Brown, Rashad Bateman with a full season of development, Devin Duvernay in the slot with obviously Vias Jones potentially contributing to that room, Mark Andrews at tight end, Ronnie Stanley there at left tackle, Ben Cleveland had injuries all year last year, but he's back at left guard, Patrick McCarry moved inside to center as they let Bradley Bozeman walk, Kevin Zeitler back at right guard, and then Jawan James back from injury, hopefully on that right tackle spot. If they can get on an offensive line like this and Ben Cleveland's able to perform, I think you really kind of have improved your offensive line tremendously. It wouldn't surprise me if they still look in the draft for interior offensive linemen, especially with the question marks at center, because if Macari's being brought back as a right tackle or maybe just to play guard against Cleveland, then center's a need. But ultimately, I think Macari's being brought back to play center, and I think this is how you kind of get your offense set in place. A lot of rerunning it back, but again, Daniel Falele could easily step in at that right tackle spot once he's ready. You have some contributors like Sincere McCormick and Vias Jones in the later picks that will add in via rotation. So look out for that. And then on the defense side of things, yes, you're losing Brandon Williams. Tyus Bowser's still there, though, but you have Odafe Owe and David Ojabo at the edge. The defensive line still has Derek Wolfe and Fedarian Mathis. You have Broderick Washington on the defensive line now instead of Calais Campbell, which is obviously a little bit of a drop-off, but I think with the additional draft picks and some help on there, there's definitely potential there for the defensive line to contribute still as a strong unit. At linebacker, you're running it with Bobby Wagner and Patrick Queen. At corner, you have Marcus Peters, Marlon Humphrey healthy again, Brandon Stevens, who was really a late-round stud for the Ravens in this last draft class, and then at safety of Deshaun Elliott and Chuck Clark. I think the Ravens are a team that, assuming they're healthy, they should definitely be in a good spot to contend as at least a high seed playoff team. And potentially, with the development of Lamar further, they could potentially be a team that contends for a Super Bowl. But, adding pieces like with Bobby Wagner, filling in the gaps left by Brandon Williams with a guy like Fedarian Mathis, that's how you get this team back to just continuing their dominance as an overall roster. Nick, we've talked about the Ravens in so many lights. The team that was kind of running through playoffs and one of the best teams in the AFC to now a team that was struggling with injuries all year and missed playoffs altogether. What do you think the expectation is here for Baltimore with hopefully a healthy roster?
Well, I think their expectation is minimum playoffs, but probably they're thinking Super Bowl because that offense, when healthy, is explosive. And, getting Bobby Wagner would be a tremendous upgrade defensively. Getting Ojabo off the edge is awesome. I mean, he was great this year, of course, with Michigan. So they're certainly, when healthy, a force to be reckoned with. That's for sure.
Absolutely. And according to Joe Person, the Panthers are reportedly going to be extremely active in pursuing Deshaun Watson. We talked about that before.
They're not going to go with Sam Darnold again next year?
Sounds like maybe they don't believe in Darnold as much as
you think Darnold stays there as a backup, or did somebody?
I don't think so. I think
Darnold's
they'll have to find a way
anywhere. I guess they'll just cut him.
He won't start anywhere, but they got to find somewhere to kind of take his contract in order to take Watson and still have some space.
So I guess Darnold would have to go to the Texans on that trade.
Yeah, it'd be a situation where he just goes and is backup for the Texans while they don't really care about having money saved up in their backup QB. But back to the Ravens. Yeah, this is a team that, with a guy like Bobby Wagner in linebacker, with the potential that a David Ojabo brings, with other draft picks that we talked about, I think they have a chance to reclaim this division. And I think that's something where a lot of people are very set on, Cincinnati made the Super Bowl, they're going to absolutely run it back. I think they very easily could, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Ravens get it. I wouldn't be surprised if the Browns get it. I wouldn't be shocked if the Steelers somehow pull it off. Like, all these teams in these divisions are very good in the AFC, besides like the AFC South. So, AFC North, AFC West, probably two of the best divisions in football. They got to come with it. And I think, the Ravens here, adding a guy like Wagner absolutely does that for them.
Absolutely. I think it could be a difference maker.
Well, that is all we have for you today on Destination Draft Day. We will probably have so much more on Monday, especially with everything that was already breaking today. I expect many more storylines. Nick going on vacation, so he unfortunately will not be here.
Well,
But
that's why we did that's why we did 2 shows today. We did our part 1 where we talked about just Aaron Rodgers, and we did part 2 where we talked about everything else.
absolutely. So we will see you guys. Have a great weekend. Nick, have a great week on vacation. Enjoy the time off. And for me, I will most likely be here Monday. It'll just depend on my other job and what the workload is. But most likely, I'll be here Monday, and we'll be talking Seattle and many other teams. As who knows what's going to happen in the NFL. But until then, have a great weekend. Take care and be safe. Peace.